Well, with all the talk about property tax reform and township consolidation, the whole nine yards, we've had a number of conversations on this program about township consolidation, but it's very rare we get to talk to someone who offers an alternative to consolidation. Join us on the news line is Jason Critchlow. Jason is the Portage County Township Trustee up in the South Bend area. So, Jason, my friend, thank you very much for being with us. Did I get your title right?
Yep, Portage Township trustee here in St. Joseph County. And that is important because there are other Portage townships, and that does cause confusion.
And I want to say, I also want to get people confused with Portage and Laporte. So it all seems to run together after a while, my friend. So,
No, I understand. Yeah, yeah.
so help us out here. What is explain for our audience once again? What is the trustee's job, purpose, statutorily, constitutional, etc.?
So, yep, the township government is a form of local government, just like any other form of local government, and like a city, like a county, and actually, it has a lot of the same statutory authority that a local government has. There are specific things that township governments do tend to focus on, and that is called out by statute. And some of those things are what's called poor relief or township assistance. That's a major one, especially for a township like mine. If folks fall on hard times, they've exhausted every other opportunity in their life, they can come apply for assistance from the township with basic necessities. So rent, utilities, food, some burial, things like that. The other major responsibility for township government these days is fire protection. If you do not live in a city that provides fire protection for you, then it's very likely that your fire department, your fire protection is run somehow by a township government. Now, outside of that, townships have cemeteries, they have community spaces, they can do a lot of parks, things like that. I've been to a lot of townships all around the state of Indiana and seen a lot of different things that they do. What they tend to do and focus on really just depends on the geography of where you are. So for me, I'm in Portage Township. The city of South Bend grew within Portage Township. Well, now that makes me one of the largest townships by population within the state of Indiana. So what does that mean for someone like me who has a township of 100,000 people? Well, the city of South Bend already provides great parks and great community spaces. So that's not what I tend to focus on so much. Um, but we do have a high degree of poverty here in the city of South Bend. So township assistance, helping people, helping working families make ends meet tends to be a lot of the focus of what we do. Now, that being said, a portion of my township does exist outside of the city of South Bend's boundaries. So I'm responsible for providing the fire protection of that area. So I am the provider unit of a fire territory, which we can get into more if you'd like, but that basically, it means that we have joined forces with another township to share resources and jointly run a fire department together.
Now, Jason, let me ask you this because some folks may wonder, like, okay, no poor relief we get, no fire assistance we get, cemeteries we get. What makes a township unique to handle those? Why can those be put down to the city level or up to the county level?
You can make an argument for it, and there is talk of that every legislative session. But in the end, there's a couple things at play there. The one thing they can't figure out is fire protection. If you really want to know in a nutshell, they can't figure out that fire piece. It is very complicated. It is much more nuanced than people think. Culturally, it's in the Stone Age in many ways, and especially here in the state of Indiana, that is very difficult. It's a very difficult culture to change and to deal with. But also take a county like St. Joseph County. So we're a county of 300,000. We've got two municipal centers with the city of South Bend and the city of Mishawaka. But then we've got an area called Granger, and that is an unincorporated area that has 20,000 residents up there. The county doesn't provide many services up there. There's no parks. There's no other things, amenities up there that are really provided by the county government. They have no city government. So it's the township government that actually provides a lot of their parks and a lot of their trails and those types of things. So one argument that I could make is for that area of Granger, for those 20,000 residents, is anybody going to care about that area as much as the township, which is Harris Township, that has that area within it. So there's a lot of nuance to that. You can go to some, I'm lucky. I'm St. Joseph County. I'm in a big county, but I always tell people you can go to Randolph County or you can go to some of these other counties that may only have 20,000 people. The county treasurer is only there part-time, maybe once a week. You can leave notes on his door. When he can get to it, he can get to it. They don't have full-time staff. And so in a very real sense, the township government is the local government in some of those areas. And so there are definitely a lot of modernization. There's a lot of modernization that can occur. Can the idea that you suddenly, with one swipe of the pen, transfer all responsibilities to the county? Very nuanced, very difficult to do. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, everything I just said is the entire county government. You're basically removing government further and further away from people, right? Is the county government going to care about every one of these areas as much as that hyper-local township government? At the same time, those townships run fire departments, which are very complicated. Does the county want to do that? Most of them do not want to do that. And then finally, townships tend to own a lot of assets. They have cemeteries, they have community centers, I've seen senior centers, I've seen trails, I've seen parks. Does the county want to now be responsible for managing all that as well? You will find very often, no, they do not. So it seems simple in concept when people say it, but it's usually, I say, it's kind of a brainless thought. If you really think about it, if you really have an understanding of local government, how these people all work together or don't work together, it's a much more difficult idea.
Jason Critchlow, our guest on the program today. Jason is the Portage County Township Trustee. That is in South Bend, St. Joseph County. So one of the largest townships in the states. So we're having a conversation about townships and consolidation, the whole nine yards. But we're doing it from sort of the township perspective. Jason, you said something interesting about fire consolidation, saying fire consolidation is very nuanced, very difficult to do. It was done here in Marion County. 6 of the 9 townships were all sort of consolidated with exception of Center, because that was in the old IFD fire district. We got 3 on sort of the western end. I call it the Marcia, Jan, and Cindy townships. If you look at Marion County, sort of the old Brady Bunch show, and you and I are in the same age group, so you get what I'm talking about. But Alice, Greg, Mr. Brady, Mrs. Brady, Peter, and Bobby, they're all consolidated. So I guess my question is fire consolidation that difficult? Or if Marion County can do it, can't anybody do it?
So first of all, fire consolidation territory is the way of the future. Fire territories, mergers is the way of the future. Is it easy? No. And let's take Marion County out of the equation, because actually Marion County's government is governed by a different set of laws. So Marion County cannot be used as an example anywhere in the state of Indiana.
And just let everybody know, Marion County is governed by a consolidated city statute, which is a different creature than the other 90-something odd counties. I think with the exception maybe like Evansville, I think. But otherwise, it's all consolidated government.
Yeah, but we can take a county like ours. Here in St. Joseph County, we have several fire territories that operate very well together. But here's how I describe a fire territory. You've got a township like mine, and you've got a township like our neighbor. And we say, we're going to get together, and all a fire territory is an interlocal agreement. That is all it is. It basically exists on paper that says, you know what, we are going to combine our resources and run one fire department all together. We're going to create a board that oversees everything, and that's it. Now, why I describe it that way and why that's important is I describe fire territories like pre-Civil War America. They only work if everybody agrees that they're working. It just takes one vote of one of those township boards to leave that fire territory. Okay. Now, that is a very chaotic thing to have to plan for the future under. And I can give you a lot of reasons why. But for instance, right now, Portage Township has 1 fire station, and the township that we are partners with has 2 fire stations. So as a fire territory, all of them are Portage Township employees because we are the provider unit for them. We share resources. We share the tax dollars that all come in that people pay for that fire protection. All the firemen service the entire area. We've got 1 fire chief that manages the whole thing. It's great. We've got shared assets, right? We buy things together, and that means our township owns part of it and that township owns part of it. Now, what if something were to happen and we get a new election that comes in and one of those township boards says, we don't want to do this anymore? 1 vote. They hold 1 vote and they say, we're having a divorce. And that's exactly what it is. So you basically have to go through now. Not only do you have to figure out how am I going to provide fire protection now outside of this structure, we now have shared equipment that we've got to split the assets somehow. We've got shared cash reserves. We have shared bank accounts. We have insurance. We've got, perf. We've got assets that we all join together. When they decide to split apart, it's very much like a divorce. And so it's not, I don't want to call it a flimsy concept, but it's not very ironclad the way it exists right now. And why that's important when you really take a step back, and why I think more consolidations, there's a lot of reasons why more consolidations are what's important for the future when it comes to fire protection. But for instance, in my fire territory, I need to rebuild my fire station. It's old. It's been repurposed. It was a volunteer station, and we added some bunk rooms to it, but it's not super safe for the firefighters for their health and safety. It's also not really well positioned to service. It services our area very well, but it's not well positioned to maybe service other areas very well. Wouldn't it be nice if I could convince this township down here to join our fire territory? And if they joined our fire territory, they don't have a fire station. So I will rebuild mine closer to them. So it will be able to service my whole area and their whole area if they decide to join our fire territory. There's a reason why I would never do it. And why? Because of what I just described. We would have to build a brand new fire station way down here under the guise of this partnership, right? Because we are now all one territory and it's going to help service this area. Well, what if I build that fire station down there, and in a couple of years, that township says, we're out. We don't want to do this anymore. They hold one vote and now they're gone. Now I'm left with a fire station that's down here, not servicing my area like it should, and well positioned to service an area that is no longer part of this territory. So hopefully that makes sense, but that it's very hard to plan for a future when all of these exist only under interlocal agreemends.
Jason Critchlow, our guest on the program today. Jason is the trustee in Portage County trustee in St. Joe, South Bend, sort of a consolidated area. It's not a consolidated area, but we're talking about local government consolidation. Jason, you bring up an interesting point on the whole issue of fire, because my running joke has always been, when the fire breaks, the fire doesn't care. The fire doesn't recognize lines. The fires are where they are. If the fires don't do that, why should we?
Yeah, well, that's a big deal, right? And that's called mutual aid. And that's a big thing that we have going on right now for my fire territory. For instance, okay, so first of all, people need to understand that when we talk about fire protection, we're really talking about EMS, right? Emergency medical response. They are your primary emergency responders. 80% of the calls that come to a fire department are for medical emergencies, not for fires. So you got to think of it in those terms. But we have an area here in St. Joseph County that's seeing explosive growth. There's data centers that are going into an area. It exists in a different area outside of my fire territory. About 15% of our calls, our out of territory calls, are going into that area, right? Because their department up there is busy. They can't respond to those calls. We have what's called mutual aid. These firemen are never going to sit by. If somebody calls for help, even though they're not in our area and their department can't get to them, then we're going to go get to them. And that's okay to do, because sometimes people come provide us with mutual aid. But what happens when that balance starts to shift too much? What happens when a lot of our calls are going into that area? Well, the problem with that is my taxpayers are paying for that. Those taxpayers are not. And again, it's a pretty good deal for that area up there, because they're getting all this extra protection. They're getting the call serviced, but they're not paying for that. My taxpayers are paying for that. It starts to get to be this awkward conversation, because we all work very well together. All these fire departments work very well together. But when you start really looking at a fairness value or a fairness factor, that starts to become a problem. I'd also talk about the hyper competitive environment that we're in right now. When I created this fire territory, I did it because my firefighters were being paid about $20,000 less than the market rate for firefighters in this area. So what quality of firefighters are my residents getting when that's all that we're willing to pay? So I created this new fire territory with the idea that we need to boost pay. We also didn't have an ambulance. We didn't have an ambulance service to this area. I created this fire territory with our partner township in order to put this ambulance in here. So some areas are getting better service than others simply because of decisions that are being made locally. But those decisions that are being made locally are being made that way because they're constrained by resources. And that's why you're seeing these merger conversations really being talked about by people like me. And I often joke, because it's definitely causing drama, here in my own backyard with folks. And I tell people, my fire department is fine. We're going to exist for the next 20 years. We're well funded. We got everything we need, amazing high quality firefighters. But these other areas around us, not so much. Help is not a 5-minute, ride away. In some areas, Help is a 20-minute ride away because they don't have the funding. The only real cure for that in this environment is more mergers.
Jason Critchlow, our guest in the program today. Jason is the Portage Township Trustee in St. Joe County in the South Bend area. So we're talking today about fire consolidation and mergers and the whole nine yards. Jason, what are you hearing from your other? You seem to be like a really sharp guy. You know, even though you went to South Bend, I'll give you credit where credit's due. My best friend from law school went to Notre Dame, so I give her a hard time too. So no need to worry, my friend. What when you have this conversation with your other township trustees, do you tell them that that consolidation is coming? We need to get in front of it, or we're going to be under it.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the message. I mean, we're already under mandatory mergers. There are mandatory mergers that are going to be rolling out. I mean, at the end of this year, we're going to see a list that 1/3 of the townships in the state of Indiana are going to be forced to merge with another. But there also exists a process to do a voluntary merger. If a township decides to do a voluntary merger, they actually get a lot more say in what that new merged government looks like. In a mandatory merger, they do not get as much say. So that's why I'm starting to put forward this conversation that says, hey guys, we should be looking at doing voluntary mergers. Maybe this is a good moment to take a look at the 13 townships in St. Joseph County and say, how can we reimagine this? How can we make this service a modern society in the way that everybody gets the same level of service and it's efficient for the tax dollars and all those things? And it's drama, man. I mean, there's folks that they do not want to hear that. It's farmers that have been in this job for 30 years and they like it when it was a volunteer department. And they say, Jason, people understand when they move out here that help might be a 20-minute call away or a 30-minute call away. And I tell them, I said, I don't think that is the cultural expectation anymore. I think the expectation is that help is going to be here right now. So it's not super well received, but the point is, I have a couple of my fellow trustees that are with it, and they also agree that it needs to happen. So my point in just putting forward this, I mean, some of them are very mad at me, for even talking about this. So I've been kind of having to tell them, like, guys, it's not me that's pushing this on you. It's the state of Indiana. I'm trying to tell you to be proactive. Get your arms around it right now and decide, shape how this future is going to look like for your community. Because in the next few years, you're going to lose the ability to do that. So it's been dramatic and it's been hard for people to hear, but these are the tough I've just been the bad guy in the room that's saying what's already existing out there.
Jason Critchlow, our guest on the program today. Jason is the trustee in Portage Township, that is in St. Joe County, in the South Bend area. A little bit of his township creeps into St. Joe County. So we're talking about consolidation from a local government, from a township perspective. Jason, one thing I also noticed too in this conversation was Senate Bill 1, the property tax caps, less money coming into local governments. And I think it was interesting because I've been here since 2004 when Mitch Daniels first became governor. And I remember he sort of put two proposals on the table, like, hey, we can do Kern and Shepherd where we consolidate everything, or we can have property tax caps. And people took the property tax caps bait, like, I don't know what you guys just did. We just played into Mitch's trap because now you're going to get starved to death as opposed to do this sort of voluntarily. So in a world of property tax caps and Senate Bill 1 and people just up in arms over property tax caps, local governments not necessarily being the most popular thing in the world these days, I guess the question is, how do you folks sort of reconcile that, or at least the opponents of consolidation, how do they reconcile a less revenue world that's coming starting next year?
Oh, the simple answer is they don't. I mean, if I've learned anything, especially in township government, is these folks, well, they'll just let it smack them in the face. And it's been one of my more frustrating things that people do not want to act proactively. They do not want to think ahead. They are only thinking about today. They're only thinking about how do I get through these next moments? How do we budget for next year? They're not thinking of what should this look like in 3 or 4 years. And so when these things hit, I mean, it's going to be wild to see what that reaction is, because I have not found government, especially local government in Indiana, to be very good at being proactive, especially the townships. They just, and I think there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I think when I started talking about this, it was funny how many people said, Jason, what are you talking about? Forced mandatory mergers. I haven't heard anything about this. And I was laughing because I was like, the Indiana Townships Association, we've been talking about this every week for all year. They act like this is the first time they've heard this. And I think maybe it's just because it's been talked about for so long and nobody believed it because nothing ever happened. Well, here we are. In the next election year, 1/3 of the townships in Indiana are not going to exist anymore. And I guarantee you, very little movement has been made by those townships to prepare for that. And it's going to smack folks in the face like a 2x4.
Our guest on the program today is Jason Critchlow. Jason is the trustee in Portage Township, that is in St. Joe County, near South Bend. So we're talking about consolidation, all the things that are sort of coming along with this issue here. Jason, you put together sort of an alternative consolidation proposal. You did some interesting maps, which is sort of what got me to reach out to you. Tell our audience what you did and how has your plan been received?
So basically, I just said, again, these mandatory mergers are coming. There are townships in St. Joe County that will be affected by this. Let us take an opportunity to work together and reimagine what township government looks like in St. Joseph County. What makes the most sense for us to do from a voluntary merger standpoint, from creating more efficiency for taxpayers, for providing more value and better quality fire and EMS services, and maybe just better local government response. Let's take this opportunity. So I put pen to paper. I described exactly what the process of mergers is, what it would look like, what a timeline would be. And then I created some maps. I said, hey, I think it makes sense for all the South Bend precincts to be in one township. So what if we consolidated these 4 townships into one? And then what if we consolidated these into one? And then basically we took the 13 townships of St. Joe County and we brought it down to 3 townships. Now, again, that was me just sitting here in my house, knowing these communities, knowing what I think makes sense. It did not include the dozens of other elected officials in those townships that all have a say in this. And I just threw it out there at our must meeting, which was, a mandatory meeting to talk about income tax. And it landed like a bombshell, man. And it was kind of, my wife's been teasing me. She said, I can't believe you're so surprised at people's reaction to this. But I was. I mean, some folks understood that I was just kind of the messenger here of what's coming down the pike. There were some rural folks that, they don't like South Bend. They don't like the big city guys. And so they always look at me with a raised eyebrow and what's in this for you? And what do you get out of this? And so there was some very strong negative reactions to it for sure. But I have my fellow township trustee over here in Mishawaka. Her name's Doris Portales. She's also, is a very large township. She's like me. She's very forward thinking. So she's convening a meeting of the trustees to just say, hey, look, Jason's just putting together ideas to get the ball rolling, to get us talking. And that really was the point, just to get people talking about this. Every township right now still has a little bit of say in what happens in their future. But what they need to understand is that time is running out. So it was a visceral reaction that people had to any sort of consolidation or elimination of township government, especially from those rural areas of St. Joe County. So I imagine that's what it's going to be like all over the state of Indiana.
You bring up an interesting point because is township consolidation more of a policy issue, or is it more of that urban versus suburban versus rural type deal?
It's a good question. I mean, I think the state of Indiana is under some fictitious idea that this is somehow going to save money and that's not going to happen. I actually think they're not going to solve anything with this. I mean, they had some really harebrained things that came out of the State House when it came to road funding from townships and stuff that was just dumb and didn't go anywhere, isn't going to solve any problems. But I mean, a lot of these counties are completely rural. So I'm not really sure how some of them will respond to this because, I mean, some counties are going to lose most of their townships, from this bill for sure. Here in St. Joe County, it's a definite mistrust of urban. We moved out here because we want to live out here. We want to control our own destiny. And in a way, it was a very American response that some of these folks had where it was like, over my dead body, out of my cold dead hands. That was the reaction from some of those rural folks who I respect. And I think we have a mutual respect in many ways, but it was like Jason, you stay over there in the city, we'll stay over here in the country, and it is what it is. So there's definitely some undertones of that, at least here.
We've got a couple minutes left here. Jason Critchlow, our guest on the program today. Jason is the trustee in Portage Township, that is in the South Bend, St. Joe County area. And so we're looking at consolidation, what's going to be happening next year with Senate Bill 1 fully goes to effect and local governments start losing money or lots of revenue sources start going away. Jason, let me ask you this. I know you guys are more in the Township Trustee universe. What are you hearing from your local schools?
Well, I mean, the local schools, the libraries are probably freaked out more than anything, to be honest with you. I think the schools are freaked out, but they're in this like referendum type of world now where they know that they have to exist on referendums. So I think they tend to talk more about the next referendum and the need to pass that next referendum. That's what I hear from the schools. I think the libraries are what people are really sleeping on. They were really cut out of this whole local income tax conversation. So if I've heard more hand wringing from our local library systems than I have from the schools, interestingly.
Um, like I said, as we get ready to wrap here, I want to go back to how we started our conversation with what 92 counties. I want to say what 1,008 townships, I think it is, here in the state of Indiana. Literally a third of about 300 or so of them gone come next year. Uh, what do you say? What would you say is the future of township government?
The merger. I mean, I don't think the idea of taking all township responsibilities and throwing them to the county is going to work. I don't see that working without a lot of thought and a very complex, well thought through plan to come through to execute something like that. I think this merger idea is what makes sense. I think you got to look at counties and say, if you're going to get rid of if you're going to get rid of townships at all, then it makes sense to what does it need to look like for your county? Does it need to be an East Township and a West Township? Because again, in the end, I firmly believe that nobody's going to care about these duties. Nobody's going to care about that park that exists in the middle of a cornfield more than that township government is, because that's where they live and that's who they serve. So I think the future, if township government wants to exist, the future is definitely mergers. It's a merger environment and trying to keep like-minded communities together. That's why even in my proposal, I created an urban township and an urban township and then a rural township when I consolidated 13 down to 3 because I was just trying to keep that culture in mind. I was trying to show that I think you can still preserve some sort of semblance of that culture of a local government from a local government perspective.
What do you think about the people actually use the township services thing, or do they have an opinion, or do they really care how it's structured as long as they get whatever relief is needed, whatever fire department is needed, whatever at a big grandma in the cemetery, whoever takes care of that. They really don't care who's in charge as long as the service gets done.
That's probably true to a point, but when the residents hear about this, they hate it. I mean, I've heard from residents more than elected officials, the idea that somebody living, for the idea that somebody in South Bend would be in charge of the services, the park over in North Liberty, which is a rural community 15, 18 miles outside of South Bend, that has a visceral negative reaction by residents of that area. They certainly want to maintain that autonomy and that local control. And, this is one of those things again in government where people were not paying attention when the state's passing these things. And now here we are and the repercussions are here and everybody's pulling their hair out and running around like things are on fire when folks like me were like, well, yeah, this is what we tried to warn you about. And now it's here.
All right. Well, guest in the program today has been Jason Critchlow. Jason is the trustee in Portage Township, that is in South Bend and St. Joe County. So, Jason, my friend, sir, thank you very much for being with us. Always appreciate your perspective. And if you don't mind, we'll be reaching out to you next session as lawmakers kind of do whatever it is they're going to do.
I'll be down there, so no problem. I'm on the ITA's legislative committee, and I've been very happy to be involved with the work that they do down there. So I'm happy to chat.